5 to 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Oh. Good afternoon, colleague, again. Because of the time constraint, while we are waiting for the minister to come, we will change a little bit the order. Again, my name is Marco Yamaguchi. I'm the manager for the transport and logistics division at the African Development Bank. Thank you for coming for here. So the topic of this the side event today is to talk about the entrenching the smart logistics into the green the supply chain in Africa. The objective of this of the session is to mainly the four elements. The one is the demonstrate the value of the smart logistics in stimulating the investment into the to achieve the green supply chain in Africa. The big issue is the we want to talk about the trade inefficiency in Africa, and it's been this is the one of the critical issue to improve the competitiveness in terms of the trade in Africa. So we need to find a solution, and then to make it worse, there's a COVID, which also even worse the situation of that. But by the time now as a post-COVID, and then it's time for us to catch up. And then by making the most of the technology we have so far, by investing this technology and to address this the trade issue. And then the second one is again we want to showcase the technical assistance opportunity in supporting the transition to smart logistics by anchored partners we invited today, and then mobilize additional strategic partnership, private sector and then public sector, and then fast track the resource mobilization effort. And then the third objective is to highlight the collaboration among the MDVs and the private sector again, and then the key partners in Africa, how the transport infrastructure and the logistics actors can mobilize resources to finance the smart logistics and the green infrastructures. And then lastly, we aim to appraise the stakeholders on the opportunity within the bank to support capacity building of the transport and logistic industry on the necessary roadmap to manage the transition to the green technology. So these are the kind of the objective for today for discussion. We have also the virtual connection today, so there are many colleagues who are joining the virtually. And so the order of the session today, again, so we changed the order a little bit. We would jump to the first. Okay, we want to the opening remark by our VP Solomon, and then followed by depending on if the minister arrive or not, then we may want to jump to the panel session. But let us begin the asking for the Vice President, the Solomon Queno, to address the opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. It's the first time I've had to speak in one of these areas where there's a lot of competing attention, but I'll try and speak up. Okay. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this side event dedicated to entrenching smart logistics into the green supply chain in Africa. Addressing Africa's economic infrastructure gap is crucial for sustainable development. Smart logistics are key to regional corridors which connect countries, facilitate trade, and foster economic growth. The purpose of this session is to fast-track the implementation of smart technologies to ease existing bottlenecks within the transport and logistics supply chain in Africa by mobilizing significant investments in the public and private sector. So climate change is one of the most significant challenges facing Africa today, with severe implications for transport and logistics infrastructure, livelihoods, and economic growth. Extreme weather events such as flooding, sea level rises, and storm surges repeatedly wreak havoc on transport and supporting networks in Africa. In Africa, extreme weather is a threat that can cause extensive disruptions to transport and logistics infrastructure, further exacerbating existing weak logistics networks. So to address this, we at the African Development Bank intervene in the transport and logistics sector by encouraging private sector involvement through strengthening the enabling environment of countries by providing policy and regulatory framework support, in addition to financing transport and logistics projects. While carrying out such interventions, the bank mainstreams climate change adaptation and mitigation initiatives to address the need for sustainable development. So there is an urgent need to unlock and direct investments into smart logistics and green supply chains in Africa, and simultaneously reduce trade inefficiencies in Africa. So this requires facilitation through a holistic approach to infrastructure development in Africa by addressing the entire logistics infrastructure value chain and focusing on key long-term strategic interventions. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but an estimated $20 to $30 billion per annum is required over the next 10 to 20 years to meet climate change adaptation within Africa's transport infrastructure sector alone. It is recognized that the development of smart logistics, once again, is not only a major step towards addressing climate change, but it also has the dual potential for increasing trade efficiency. So Africa's full participation in global supply chains, we know, is constrained by high logistic costs, with African countries paying 40 to 70% more on average in international transport costs for imports relative to other developing regions. Now, these costs are even higher in Africa's 16 landlocked or land-linked countries, depending on your point of view, where transport costs are up to 4 times higher than the coastal region, with freight costs accounting for at least 20% of the total import value. Their fragile infrastructure, complex customs, and administrative setup result in even higher transaction costs, restricting the capacity of landlocked and/or land-linked countries to be competitive regionally and globally. Welcome, Your Excellency Magala. You're on time because I've only just started. Okay. So we need actions to promote climate change resilience and decarbonization in African ports and the shipping industry, and this could be achieved by promoting climate resilient port infrastructure and the Green Corridor concept with zero-emission shipping. The logistics sector is a vital backbone that carries a nation's economy and delivers on its trade potential, and this has always been the backbone of global trade and thus essential to build up a universal understanding on smart logistics as a key to make transport and logistics industries more sustainable and climate-friendly. Furthermore, there's a growing belief that digitalization, covering port operations and trade facilitation, digitalization of logistics will be the driving force behind how the African markets will grow in the future. So the adoption of smart and logistics is slowly gaining ground, and it involves prioritizing sustainability and a reduced environmental footprint and minimized impact of logistics activities when it comes to freight, logistics, and supply chain practices. While logistics in Africa is in a recovery mode post-pandemic, 2 factors that will shape its future are digitalization of logistics, once again, the embracing of new technology, that is, and sustainable logistics in African markets. So I look forward to the panel discussion today, all the various presentations, given the esteemed colleagues joining us today. So in conclusion, the African Development Bank stands ready to partner with all of you to support the entrenching of smart logistics into Africa's green supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Vice President, the Queno. We are lucky enough the Minister Magara came on time, so we don't change the order. And then, if you are okay, we are jump into the minister's the keynote speech. So let me introduce the Minister, the Magara Mateus, the Minister of the Transport and Communication of the Republic of the Mozambique. So we would like to hear from you on the country's the situation of the logistics and then your vision of the strategy of the logistic, smart logistic and clean supply chain in Mozambique. Over to you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Vice President Solomon Quena, my friend and former colleague, and distinguished guests and moderators, ladies and gentlemen. So, as a matter of context, allow me to say that it is now recognized that climate change is one of the most significant threats to human existence and sustainability of our planet. Science has already established that human activity can have a negative impact on climate change, and that pollution from transport and logistics activities is one of the most serious challenges and a major concern in Africa and afar. Now, the key issue then is how can we ensure a green transition? In other words, how can we operate green supply chains through smart logistics? Essentially, how can we do things differently and better, such that we reduce pollution from our transport and logistic activities. Suffice to say from onset that there won't be green supply chains without green industrialization and transport decarbonization. Therefore, my intervention will focus on the green transition and how to entrench smart logistics into green supply chain in Mozambique using the Maputo corridor as the case in the reference. As you well know, Mozambique is a country with enormous potential in logistics, as it is a coastal country with about 2,700 kilometers of coastline. It borders 6 countries, 3 of which are landlocked countries. It has 3 logistic corridors that are the backbone of national exports and imports, and those of SADC region, including DRC. Now, the Maputo corridor, consisting of a network of railway lines and the corridors, connect South Africa, Zimbabwe, Eswatini, and Botswana with the ports of Maputo, the largest port infrastructure in Mozambique, which currently handles about 30 million tons per year. The Maputo Development Corridor carries industrial as well mineral products such as chrome, chrome ore, ferrochrome, coal, magnetite, phosphate rock, lithium, aluminium, and graphite to the world. So the issue here is the Maputo corridor is the center of our strategic intervention because it is under enormous pressure on its road, where traffic has grown considerable in less than 2 years, from about 400 trucks per day to 2,000 trucks carrying minerals, apart from other commercial trucks and vehicles. The truck queues have reached in recent times lengths of 50 kilometers at the border with South Africa on the South African side. Taking around 10 hours to cross the border. To travel further down, 80 kilometers from the border to Maputo ports. This led to a big disadvantage in trade with the regional and global economies and the loss of market competitiveness. From the border through the national road number 4, also known as N4, 2,000 trucks spend on average 100 liters of diesel each per day to cover about 198 kilometers, which is the round trip. And this translates roughly into 160,800 tons of CO2 just on that segment per annum, which then can be about $1 million to $3 million of cost of pollution for a small segment of 80 kilometers, depending on the pricing of the carbon in the range of $5 to $20. The N4 traverses a major settlement in Maputo. During peak hours, the average speed is about 20 kilometers due to congestion, costing about 90 million in excess fuel due to frequent stops and starts. Apart from the stress that about 20,000 drivers endure a day, they must spend about 2.5 hours to cover, I would say, 40 kilometers or 80 kilometers the round trip. To work with the huge number of accidents, low productivity levels, and low quality of life. The impact to people is more negative than the cost of fuel and environment. To make things worse, several natural disasters such as the recent Cyclone Freddy damaged the road, infrastructure, and accelerated aging, leading to further financial losses. Now, given this scenario, the government has taken some actions, such as working with South African. We managed to reach an historical agreement between CFM, which is the Railway and Ports Company of Mozambique, and the Transnet, South African operator, logistic and rail operator, on what we coined trains without borders. This is a seamless train services whereby trains bound from both sides do not need to stop at the border to change the crews or the locomotive, as was the case before. This also was done with the Swatini and makes the operation very efficient. So, at the border, a dry port was built to allow that the trucks coming from South Africa can offload minerals and return to South Africa without needing of immigration service. And that's cuts that leg of 88 kilometers that they have to travel under heavy congestion. The minerals are offloaded, are then transported by train to the port of Maputo, thus making the deliveries more predictable and cheaper because of scale, above all, more social and environmental friendly. For the trucks going directly to the port of Maputo from the origin, customer clearance is now done electronically without paper, and the drivers can be afforded multiple entry passes, which was not the case before. More recently, the government of Mozambique approved the construction of one-stop border post in Rissano Garcia, with the process and systems to be integrated, and envisaged dedicated border control for trucks. It also intends to fully digitalize the logistics process from source to sinks. This border post is to be managed as a PPP initiative. The rail on the South African side runs on the electrical rail line. Mozambique is in this process, now in the process of developing its first electrical rail line, so that trains can move from both sides without the need to change the fuel source at the border, because South Africans, they have the electrical line, we have diesel. So when it comes to the border, even the trains have to change, which is a massive logistic cost, but also environmental not friendly. Electrical trains reduce pollution and contributes to green logistics. Mozambique is working with a Czech company in planning and is planning to introduce soon a virtual weighing technology to eliminate traditional physical weigh bridges. So now we have the weigh bridge that is physical, but we found out that we can do it digitally, virtually, so that we don't need to stop and the trucks can go to the final destination. We also intend to equip all ports with the cold ironing system to allow ships dock at the port, use electricity from the main grid and not diesel to power the electricity needs while loading cargo at the port. To reduce tension between community along N4 and business, the government introduced traffic management systems whereby trucks are not allowed to enter, this is a curfew, the residential areas during the peak hours in the morning and evening, totaling about 4 hours overall. So finally, the government has created this year a technical and scientific committee to advise the government on climate change and impacts and strategy to mitigate and prevent disasters along also logistics and supply chains. Therefore, the case for investment. There are several investment opportunities that both private and public sector can pursue to improve trade efficiency, reduce costs, and achieve economic growth in Mozambique, in particular in Africa, and Africa more general. These are the promotion of green industrialization, decarbonization of transport, and of course digitalization and one-stop border post. And of course investment in green shipping. So Mozambique welcomes innovative proposals by both private and public sectors to address trade issues through smart logistics and green supply chain. With this, I would like to thank you and look forward for engagement and to hear from you how we can help Mozambique to become greener and contribute to the global agenda of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, Minister Magara. it's interesting to hear that the current situation which is very, very unproductive, but with excellent guidance and the leadership, now it's the fast track, to move to the smarter or the greener the logistics to invest. We as FDB is very much interested in working together. Thank you very much. So now that we are moving to the further discussion by inviting all the panelists from the public sector, private sector expert on this space. So let me introduce, and then please, once I call you, please come over here to have a seat. So first one is the Mr. Luis Tineo, the interim CEO of the Climate Investment Funds. Welcome. And then the next one is the Dr. Chantaline the Carpentier, the head, the trade environment, the climate change, and then sustainable development from the UNCTAD. Thank you very much. And then the next one, the Jens Thomasson, the partner from the private sector, AP Mora Capital. Thank you. And then the next one, the Mahmoud Arbastaki, Chief Operating Officer, the digital, the trade solution, the World Logistics Passport. And then the next one, the Mr. Shering Tekekara, the Global Executive, the Vice President, the Market Access, the DP World Logistics. Thank you very much for coming. So, in order for the productive discussion, the efficient discussion, we prepared small questions. Doesn't have to be just focus on the question, but in case you want to focus on the question, that's also fine. So let me just quick move to the Mr. Luis. Question that we prepared here: we know that the CIF going to launch the new the program called the Industry Decarbonization Program, which is very, very interesting for us, and then I think private sector also to make the most of. If possible, how this program will impact or contribute in terms of the promotion of the smart logistics and the green supply chain. That is one question we prepared, but it's for you to free to speak. Yeah, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Sorry. I agree with the Vice President that the competing noise can create an issue here. Anyway, so thank you for the invitation. We feel honored to be here and a participant with our partners of the African Development Bank. I'm in the interim capacity as CEO of the CIF, and some of you might be aware of the role that the CIF have played over the past 15 years in supporting African countries build more resilient infrastructure. In the case of Africa specifically, a quarter of our investments go into African countries. And for that, we have already about 80 projects. We have mobilized about $8.5 billion in financing to the region. So I would like to highlight that Vice President Solomon and the Minister highlighted two critical points. So I don't want to repeat the same figures and all that. I think that the framework and the setting of the issues is clear. I would say that from the CIF perspective, what is missing in this story is access to finance and access to affordable finance. So what the CIF is promoting through our model that has investment plans, the collaboration with the MDBs and country-led efforts is to bring concessionality to bridge these gaps. And I think that the Minister put this into a specific context of Mozambique, but we have seen that, Mr. Minister, in the over 26 countries that we are supporting, including your beautiful country, Mozambique. In the case of roads, the portfolio in CIF is quite big, and I would say that to add in this discussion, the value that the CIF is bringing is in the system transitions, particularly in energy transition, and that is also a critical element if we want to build smart logistics. It's not only how to build resilient infrastructure, it's how to also implement, renewable energy solutions, enabling the technologies to produce, the transition. Africa has 30% of the materials needed for renewable energy, and I feel like that is a target that the CIF would like to continue supporting. I recognize, the challenges that the region faces, in terms of, the natural shocks that the region faces every year, flooding, tropical cyclones, heat waves, so there is plenty of vulnerability. In your own country, Mr. Minister, resilient roads is a critical issue. You lost about 200 kilometers of roads about 5 years ago. Rebuilding, and I think that you have done quite a good job in rebuilding these roads. Now they are strong. You put significant newer materials, and that is helping a lot. But we need to do a lot more throughout the regions. We are doing all efforts to improve or help improve the conditions in these countries, and for that, the CIF is now promoting the industry decarbonization program. That is the critical piece in our portfolio to build the bridge between, for the supply chain efforts. And in that, of course, we are trying to help countries accelerate system transitions in cement, in aluminum, in the chemicals. We hope that with this program, the region will benefit tremendously. We look forward to partnering with the African Development Bank and also with other partners that I have here in the panel. And I'll stop here just indicating that the CIF remains a strong partner to the region. And we would like to build this program, the industry decarbonization program, together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luis. We actually already start talking with the colleagues, and then we would love to, once it's launched, we would love to work together under the decarbonization program. And then this, I think, smart logistics and then a clean supply chain is I think, one of the hot topics for you to be focused on. So yeah, so we're happy to work together going forward. So moving next, the Dr. De Chantal Lin. So we prepared the question about what type of the policy support is required to increase the efficiency of the trade in Africa. Could you introduce your relevant initiative to promote the trade with smart logistics, if any?
Thank you, Marco. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be with you. And let me start with lessons that we've learned from work that we've done with national green export reviews from African countries with our colleagues from ECA. And it's clear that what we need are, for example, modern facilities for food storage closer to production. There's need to be accreditation lab for food testing and conformity for the SPS and TBT restriction, therefore reducing both environmental costs and financial cost, but also increasingly with the new requirement from the EU and others, georeferencing capacity to document traceability of products, demonstrating no deforestation, harmonization of standards and regulation. The minister from Mozambique mentioned the interoperability of this system, which is very important, and also, generally digitalization. Let me just then move to 3 general areas where we provide support and we feel are important. And they were all alluded by Salomon and by the minister. Customs, transport, and national policies. So basically with custom, UNCTAD is supporting up more than 100 countries with their modernization of their customs, with one-stop, anything from just modernization, paperless to one-stop shop approach. That basically is reducing the time that the truck have to wait or the train have to wait at the custom. We have an example where we work with Djibouti and Ethiopia, where the investors would invest if we could confirm that in one day the products could get to the port into the boat. So we worked to broker a deal between and then to modernize the custom between the 2 countries and facilitate the port authorities' capacity to speed the process to meet this requirement to facilitate investment. We're also working with CITES and with the Human Rights Office to help custom agent to recognize endangered species, so you can speed up, these are not endangered, you can speed them up, as well as elimination of trafficking, of human trafficking, so you can speed up the passing of these customs. The second one on national policies, I'd like to, one of the things that a lot of countries have already signed from the South is the global system of trade preferences. And where you reduce the tariffs amongst yourself, but it goes way more than tariffs. It's also agreeing on sectoral approach, where you could agree to exchange and buy from each other. You could agree to harmonize your regulation. You could agree to have local content among the 2 partners, because these are pre-agreed and you do not have to go and bring it back to the WTO. We also are working with the port authorities in 3 ports right now in Africa. Unfortunately, Minister, not with your port yet, but with St. Louis in Mauritius, Tema, Ghana, and Tanger Med in Morocco, in leveraging the energy transition to advance promoting renewable energy use and distribution and energy-efficient technology-driven solutions. So through a project called Smart and Sustainable Port for Africa, that looks at assessment of port energy needs and potential, and to examine policy and regulatory framework to maximize energy-related opportunities. We are also providing training to vulnerable and small traders that facilitate food security actually in Africa through these by smart right-in-time information on demand and price, so these people are not exploited. So these are all, and at the national level, we also do e-readiness assessment. So already is the country for e-commerce amongst themselves, but also with the rest of the world. Finally, on transport, we are looking at decarbonization of the maritime transport, which produce 3% of the emissions right now. We work closely with the IMO because we know decarbonization of the shipping fleet will increase cost, especially in countries such as Africa, but also the LLDCs and the SIDS. So we have an MOU now, a partnership with IMO, the International Maritime Organization, to actually document those increased costs and develop together partnership in ways to help countries to remove these caveats, because we know in advance that these costs will be there. I'll conclude by saying that we are organizing with Barbados a inaugural Global Supply Chain Forum on May 21st to 24th, 2024 in Bridgetown, Barbados, that to help find co-create solution to these multifaceted challenges that address the increased volatility of maritime freight, but also transport costs in general, financial uncertainties, energy transition, concern around food security, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to bring all the stakeholders by sectors and throughout the whole supply chain to address a little bit of what we're doing here, but for the whole world. And we have a special section on SIDS and a special section on the ACFTA. And we invite our colleagues from Africa here to join us in that event on May 21st, 24th in Bridgetown. And I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Chantal, actually, with your colleagues, we are already talking on how we can collaborate. And you mentioned about the three port the program that one of them is the Tanger. The Tanger is one of our strategic, and actually TangerMed is one of our strategic partners. So maybe based on here, and in Ghana also, that obviously we are doing a lot of investment there. So actually, yes, we are already talking. So we'd love to expand the more port to work together with UNCTAD on that. Thank you very much. And then also interesting to hear that you're organizing such a big event in other parts of the world, but we would love to learn more about that. And also the IMO, yes, we also they're working together, and then we would love to develop kind of the green the shipping or the port initiative working together. So we would love to work together. Thank you so much. Okay, moving to the next the panelist, which is Jens from the AP Mora Capital. For those that maybe everybody knows, but the AP Mora Capital has a big the private equity fund. First round is, my understanding is already closing, and then moving to the big $1 billion the facility is already closing, and then moving to the second phase. Congratulations, but we would love to hear, so we prepared a question for you here. Could you provide some examples on how you are promoting and developing smart logistics and green supply chain projects? How do you maximize the value of your investment portfolio by leveraging your industry expertise and heritage? So this is a basic question. Yes, over to you.
Can you hear me on this? Is that good? Maybe I'll... Let me try this one, just better safe than sorry. But thank you very much for having me here. And just to sort of preface our approach to investing in transport infrastructure in Africa, it's you can look at the world glass half full or glass half empty. Glass half empty is, as sort of the Vice President mentioned, climate change is a major issue we're dealing with. The opportunity for the African continent is, as was alluded to earlier on, 40% of the undeveloped arable land sits on the continent, 40% of the undeveloped developed minerals reside on the continent. But transport infrastructure is scarce, and to the comment made earlier on, transport costs are unusually high on the continent compared to other markets, and we're looking to do our little piece to improve that. So I'll perhaps sort of make this a little bit concrete and talk about 2 or 3 brief examples about what we are trying to do that is a little bit out of the customary for what a typical private equity firm would do. One example is an investment we have in Nigeria. We have a flare gas business. We take gas that otherwise would be flared. We compress it, truck it to industrial users to displace diesel that otherwise would be imported into Nigeria. The CO2 impact is the same as shutting down a coal plant and putting on a solar park. But sort of practicing what we preach, we then also convert our own trucks to run on CNG rather than diesel. We then introduced a track and trace system developed by actually a startup here in the region to track not only the transport of the trucks. We're tracking speed, safety, health and safety, are people making going fast into the right turns, but also we're tracking the consumption at the user sites. So we can plan ahead in advance to make sure that our trucks are ready to pick up the empty skids where just as they turn empty, show up with a new one so the customer has a sort of a just-in-time but also continuous flow of gas to run their businesses. Switching gears a little bit to the food security, which is a core theme of our investment fund. We just did a corporate carve-out from RCL Foods in South Africa here in August. We bought a business called Vector Logistics, which is the largest distributor of chilled and frozen foods on the continent. So if you have your Nando chicken burger in Johannesburg, think of us. I hope it tastes good. We were in the back trucking it around. This is a business with 7,000 people, 26 warehouses, 550 trucks. 6% of the revenue is cost of energy. And South Africa has its challenges on the power side. We are hopeful and optimistic that this will improve. But every warehouse has a backup diesel generator. This is expensive, and it has a massive CO2 footprint. Just to make life a little bit more exciting for ourselves, we put ourselves a target across all our investments in our second fund. We have to reduce 25% of CO2 emissions on a Scope 1 and Scope 2 basis on a unit basis. That means for every pallet that we truck, it currently absorbs about 600 kilos of CO2. In Europe, that will cost you $50 just for shipping that pallet. We want to reduce that down to 450. How do we do that? We put rooftop solar panels on our warehouses. We look to exploring electrical trucks. We look to explore building EV charging infrastructure around our nexus of warehouses. And very simple things like what gas do we use to refrigerate? Is there more carbon-friendly gas we can use? And are people closing doors? Do we have the right temperature? So we're very confident that with sort of simple steps like that, and also introducing technology to track, monitor, and trace, that we can reduce CO2 emissions, but also equally important, we can reduce our cost of electricity and make this business more profitable. And then perhaps sort of as a last example, coming back to the port space, we came out of the AP group. 3 of my partners came from AP Terminals, and Tangimed is obviously, and Tema are 2 of their proudest moments. Tangimed is the largest port on the African continent. Tema was a $1 billion port built and commissioned, and I was there, had the pleasure of doing a tour together with the Queen of Denmark when she did her first state visit to the African continent. But we, as an AP Capital, are doing something slightly differently. We are very interested in the hydrogen economy. We think there is tremendous potential there. There's a lot of business model risk that needs to be proven out. And if you look at the African continent in terms of access to renewables, we have a phenomenal resource. Egypt, Morocco has world-class wind resource and solar resource. Mozambique is also well placed, as is South Africa. We have land, we have scale, and we can build some of the lowest cost renewable energy in the world. If you combine that with a place like Egypt, and we just signed an MOU with the Suez Canal Exxon here the other day, where we'll go and sit down and review, can we build the transport infrastructure to make Egypt a trading hub for green ammonia, green methanol, or other derivatives of green hydrogen. So there is an opportunity here. We want to do the port piece. We want to do the common infrastructure. That doesn't mean we don't like renewable energy. We don't feel we can do it, but there are many other people who can do that, and we really need, to the earlier point here, we need to make this cost efficient. We live in a world where energy is a commodity, food is a commodity price, staples at least, and we need to drive down the cost of transport, need to drive down the cost of production in order to make this globally competitive. So I'll pause there. I can go on forever, just in case, so I'll hand over to the next moderator, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jens. Yeah, you guys are so advanced, the all areas, in the logistics space and invest. So we would love to follow you guys. Thank you very much. So now we are a little bit at the shift to the other dimension, which is a little bit, the advocacy side. The World Logistics Passport. And we understand that it's the private sector-led initiative. So we have the Mr. Mahmoud, the Al-Bastaki here. We have a question here, if you don't mind. Understanding the World Logistics Passport is a global, the private sector-led initiative. What is the primary purpose of this initiative, and what are the benefit for the private sector logistic companies to join it?
Okay, thank you. World Logistics Passport. It was launched in Davos in 2020, and it was meant to tackle the trade barriers and enable the movement of trade across the globe, starting from Dubai, could be to any African country, to Latin American, to Southeast Asia. So it's a network of hubs. When I say hubs, are countries. And when we selected 20 countries, now 20 hubs, we activate partners. So in every country, we activate partners. Who are these partners? Are the players in the supply chain or cargo movement, be it customs operator, port, airport, logistics company, trade association, anybody who can give services to the cargo movers, financial companies, insurance, whoever who can give benefits to somebody who move cargo. So these partners give privileges, give special services, and these privileges are in time and in cost. So it should be shorter time than normal trade movement, and cost should be more reduced cost. And who benefits from these are the members. Members are freight forwarders and traders. So for example, if somebody wants to ship something from Kenya, from Mombasa to Malaysia, so we will introduce all the players in this movement of cargo, whether the partners are in Kenya or the recipient are in Malaysia. So those are, the recipients are the members, be it traders or freight forwarders. And the partners are the one who give benefits to those members, be it ports in one side or airport on the other side or logistics company on the other side. So it's a win-win and everybody gets benefits, and we want to encourage trade, remove trade barriers, extend the reach of companies. Today, if we ask an exporter in Africa, why don't you export to another country? They tell you, I don't know anybody, I don't trust anybody, I don't know how to pay this company or how to get paid. So these are the issues that we tackle in the World Logistics Passport. When it comes to logistics, to the finance, to the cross-border clearance, and also we provide digital solutions to countries. We have customs digital solutions for cross-border clearance. We have port community system, which is what they call it PCS, and also cross-border solutions that talks about border management, risk engine, and anything that will help the trade move faster and less carbon emission, because once you travel less, you minimize the carbon. Once you don't use paper, you minimize, you save the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud Arbastaki. It's interesting to hear that, getting together with the private sector and then, to make the, voice stronger, and also obviously, the technology-wise, you can bring the, invest in, the more advanced technology to make the trade more efficiency. Okay, lastly, the good things to hear about the digital, etc. So that is, I think, good movement to the next the panelist, which is the Mr. Shering Tegekara, this the global executive, the vice president of the market access of the DP World Logistics, one of the largest the logistic company in the world. We would like to hear from you. We have a prepared question. Can you share some of the DP World's the new capability in enabling efficiency in trade in and out of the Africa, helping grow the local economy? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. So it's a pleasure to be here, Minister, and good to see you again. So, DP World has now started offering end-to-end solutions, right? Now, what we know is that we have invested into 8 ports in Africa. We have committed a lot of capital going forward. What we realize is that we need to facilitate trade, and Dr. Shandel was just mentioning, to make more resilient communities, you got to create capacity locally, right? That would take care of the food security issues, that take care of the health issues. So there are certain sectors in which we are investing into deep distribution, right? So we have, at this point of time in Africa, we can give footprint of 400,000 outlets into which products like food and packaged commodities go. So we are going into the real last mile capacity building. We are creating ICDs closer to a port, whether it is a port in Berbera, we have a free zone out of Maputo, we have a free zone that is created in Rwanda, so that we are facilitating trade into and out of Africa, and the intra-Africa trade with AFCFTA coming now. So what we are doing is we are deliberately investing into capacity building in Africa. We are taking the risk away from the larger companies by giving them more visibility and traceability, taking those funding and financing on board. We have more than 30,000 people working in Africa today as DP World in all the sectors put together. So this is what we are bringing. And as private sector, we have to be smart anyway, right? Because for us, it's a question of how efficiently we manage the working capital, how efficiently we manage expiries, how efficiently we manage the sales growth. So this is now a new paradigm, right? This is what we are doing to build trade flows and economies locally, right? And we are happy to share those technologies for a wider use in the public sphere, right? So technology is once that is built, whether it is a traceability technology, whether it is something to do with cargoes, where we can do tracking of carbon footprint, all of this can be now offered to the public sector so that we collaborate on that, right? So this is what we're busy with. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sharing. It seems like we have a common interest and to work together. And maybe in Mozambique, I think as a next step is something very clear. Okay, thank you so much. The time is running by, but maybe including some virtual participant, if you have any question or the comment you want to make before closing, you have a floor. To anyone else? You want to make any questions? Don't be hesitant to make. If not, okay. You want to say something more? That is okay? Okay. Thank you so much. I want to propose something, for the next steps. I think we want to kind of, form up, kind of the working group, and to work towards the smart logistic and the global, the green, the supply chain to develop. We have the excellent private sector financing institution. We have the technology partners, and we have the advocacy partner, and then the people left, but we have DFIs, and then the public sector in the financing institution. So we all in all, that we may want to come up with one solution to work together, maybe in the Maputo corridor on the Mozambique. I think that is a good example and then a case to go. Maybe I will come back to you and then to propose, kind of the working group to work together, if you don't mind. So that is the closing. If anyone else they want to say something before closing, it's okay. Okay, perfect. So thank you so much. This is a very interesting discussion for today. And then the letters so as a next step. Oh, you want to say something?
Just one remark. Like many of the sustainability initiatives is now coming home to Africa. The other day, somebody called me and said that can we get cashew nut shell liquid? Because people have been mandated that they should shift from black oil. And they should now go and find CNSL. It's a large brewer. So, in the past, we used to just send raw cashew nuts out for processing. Now, with this sustainability initiatives, you are actually helping to reshore a lot of this thing locally and build value in the local economies, right? And make the localization of sustainability initiatives. So this is where the new trend is. So I think the initiatives has to be led by the governments and the policymakers, but the private sector is very keen to follow that because they are already making inquiries for such products, which was never asked in Africa before, right? So in a way, this is where we are also happy to invest. So we are saying, okay, fine, you need tanks for CNSL, we're happy to do in the ports. We'll handle the outbound distribution of that. So, this is how we'll collaborate.
Excellent, the suggestion. We as AFDB, we will be very happy to in between the private sector and the public sector. Okay, yes. So this is the end of the session. Thank you so much for productive discussion, and let us work together. Thank you very much.
know you guys are tired. I know you're exhausted. Emmanuel, please help us with the noise out here, if you don't mind. Oh, okay. All right. So this is a side event on advancing locally led adaptation in Africa and beyond. And the side event is organized jointly by CARE International, VSO International, Friendship International, PACJA, who are all here with us. And as we all know, in Africa and other developing regions, climate change is a long-term threat to food security, nutrition, and it increases the risk and uncertainty of, which is of course characterized by low adaptive capacity. And throughout the continent, especially in Africa, the impact of climate change on women and girls is intrinsically linked to intersecting discriminations and violations of their human rights and dignity. Therefore, it's really critical to understand that communities are in the front lines of climate impacts, yet they rarely have a voice in decision on how to protect themselves from those impacts. So given the right resources, partnerships, information, voice, and agency, local people offer huge untapped resilience building, which is potential to deliver more context-specific, coherent, accountable, democratic, agile, diverse, and cost-effective adaptation solutions. This side event, as I mentioned, will share solutions for influencing climate adaptation and women voice leadership, which will focus on the growing movement of locally led adaptation, which is a new paradigm where local actors and communities lead decisions over how, when, and where to adapt. Therefore, without further ado, I'm going to take this time to welcome our speakers, our panelists who are here with us. And I want to start with John Nodo. John Nodo is a senior advocacy advisor and climate change at the CARE Denmark. He's responsible for work on climate finance for CARE Climate Justice Center, and he's the coordinator of the Climate Financing Working Group at the Climate Action Network. He's also a co-author on a set of reports on climate finance, as well as books on global trade policy and sustainability. Please, let's clap for John as he comes to the front. Our second speaker is Mr. Charles Mwangi. Charles is a climate change policy specialist with over 17 years of experience engaging at local, national, and international levels. And currently he's serving as the head of programs and research at the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Let's clap for Charles. Third, we have Kazi Amdadul Hawk. I hope I have pronounced your name properly. He's currently working as a senior director of strategic planning and head of climate action at Friendship Bangladesh. And he contributes to strategic direction and enhancement of all programs that serve 7.2 million marginalized people in Bangladesh. Please, let's clap for him. Third, we have Wizi Chimwala. She's a youth climate manager, VSO Malawi. She's experienced youth leadership specialist with 11 years of experience working with youth champions, networks, and clubs throughout youth engagement to implement climate change actions and facilitating youth-led monitoring of SDGs to influence enabling framework towards community resilience. Let's clap for Wizi, please. Last but not least, we have Kotilda Nakeyune. She's a program manager, Climate Justice CARE International in Uganda, and she has an agroecology background with over 20 years of experience delivering natural resource and climate change programs. So our distinguished panelists here are going to help us to unpack this topic of locally led adaptation and basically share experiences, practices, and approaches on implementing and scaling LLA in Africa and beyond. We also have people from outside Africa here, so we are going to hear examples and best practices from beyond Africa, and also to help us to be able to co-create messages and recommendations, of course, to inform the negotiations and even how we do our programming in our various contexts where we work. Now, before we continue, I would like to us to do a very small exercise. Please pick a partner that you like and have this quick discussion in terms of what do you understand by locally led adaptation? In partners of 2-2, what do you understand by locally led adaptation? And maybe which principles are you aware of within the locally led adaptation? So we'll just have 2 minutes to discuss amongst ourselves, then I'll pick a pair or two to be able to report back. Feel free to also discuss amongst yourselves.
It's in our talking point.
Who is ready to report back? This group? One response.
Obed, what do you want us to say?
What you discussed. What do you understand by local-led adaptation? Yeah.
Well,
in 1 minute.
In 1 minute, we discussed about locally led adaptation being community-driven, power to communities. But let me skip over to a very interesting aspect of all of LLA cannot be led by communities. So some will be led by local governments, some by regional governments, especially around shared resources and transboundary resources. But really, it's giving power and a voice to communities to decide on projects that make an impact to them, how those are financed, to break down barriers, systemic barriers on inclusion, and also to see how they are able to track success.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This side, anyone? Henry? Huh? Okay. Let's hear from a lady.
Oh, my name is Champiana from Kenya. So adding on to what he has said, for us also, the word community is the first thing that came to my mind, and we both agreed on that. And it's about solutions for the people for the local people, by the local people, and all through being led by the local people. And it's more likely to be very successful in terms of building resilience in regards to climate change.
Thank you so much. Let's hear from this side, one response from this side before we continue.
Yeah, based on our discussion, we look at locally led adaptation as promoting stronger and meaningful participation in decision-making for communities who are at the front line, so that they should take the lead in programming. And one of is talking about making decision-making to reach the lowest level, and also Principle 7, ensuring transparency and accountability in decision-making and in financing and throughout the programming, designing and implementation as well. Communities should be involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, we'll continue. Allow me to come back to the panel here. And I want to start with Kotilda. Kotilda, you work for CARE International, and CARE is a very strong champion of locally led adaptation. So from where you stand, from where you sit, and based on your context, what does locally led adaptation look like in practice, and what are some of those good examples that you can share from your work in Uganda around locally led adaptation?
Yes, very good question that you have asked. And I usually like to explain things in a very, very simple way from a very practical point of view. In very simple terms, locally led to me, and from my experience, it simply means a bottom-up approach where the people that are impacted by climate change become the center of all interventions related to building resilience. So it all starts from assessing what kind of changes have happened in a particular community, and this doesn't have to be a rural community. As we know, climate change is impacting different settings, different communities differently. So it starts by understanding what kind of changes have happened and what these changes mean to the different people. And when I'm talking about people, I'm talking about the different groups. I'm talking about men, I'm talking about women, I'm talking about the elderly, I'm talking about the youth. So looking at what these changes mean to the different people, how they are impacted. And then after we have understood the impacts, then partner with the people that are impacted to develop solutions, test them, and then eventually scale them up. So CARE International in Uganda, like you have mentioned, has a long experience of building resilience for communities that are impacted by climate change. And CARE over the years has developed a very good model that goes from actually facilitating a process to understand these impacts and supports communities to develop adaptation action plans, and then builds the capacity of the communities to lead local lobbying and advocacy for implementation of these adaptation action plans. I want to give an example. We have a project, one of the projects that we are implementing currently is implemented in a refugee setting. So Uganda is one of those countries that are hosting refugees. We have over 1.4 million refugees hosted in Uganda. So in one of the refugee settlements that we have, we are implementing a project that is focusing on building resilience of refugees to climate change, supporting them to produce sufficient food on very small plots of land. So the process that we have undertaken in this project involved working with the communities to define exactly what the challenge is. So much as an NGO, we have a general understanding of what issues the refugees are dealing with. But we wanted it from their perspective. So we worked with them and developed an innovation challenge, which we put out there and requested partners, civil society organizations, private sector organizations, to come and respond to this challenge. So we have already come up with a number of private sector partners that have proposed solutions to this particular innovation challenge that was defined by the refugees. And they are already testing these solutions within the refugee setting. And it is the refugees that are actually appraising these solutions, whether they are going to work or they're not going to work. And then eventually, once we have reached a certain level of proof of concept, then we expect that we now start moving towards a scaling up of these solutions. So it is driven by the people that are impacted and working with local organizations and institutions to develop solutions, test them, working together with the communities that are impacted.
Thank you so much, Kotel. I think you've mentioned very critical points, especially, first of all, understanding the changes what the changes that different people experience. And of course, once you understand the challenges, you started co-creating solutions with the people that are affected on the ground. Kazi, let me come back to you. Based on your example, your experiences with the work that you do with Friendship in Asia, you've heard what Kotilda said. We'd like to know from you some of the successful approaches and best practices on local-led adaptation from where you work, and how can we scale this from local to global?
Thank you. First of all, I must say, the first word what came in my mind to tell about locally led adaptation is trust. We must have trust on people in community and rural. They can. In Friendship, we don't use the word capacity building. We use the word capacity exchange. They have certain capacity and you have certain capacity. We can exchange capacity. In the name of capacity building, they are far behind. Let's think about capacity exchange. The way we work in Friendship with the community most vulnerable, Friendship working in Bangladesh, both northern part and southern part areas, and our 100% area is climate impacted. 10 million people have a reach and access to our services. And I must say 3 actions, what is called preparedness for adaptation, emergency response, and resilience. These 3 actions need to be connected. 3 actions can't be separated. If people are really heading for adaptation, if your efforts towards adaptation and preparedness, in case of emergency, we must extend our support to help those people. And we can't stop after response, we can't stop after adaptation. We should take this journey towards resilience. And at the same time, 3 actors need to be connected. One actor is community itself, the organization, and the local government. Community will decide what to do and how to do. Local government and any other stakeholders, they will extend their support. Friendship, we form community group first. We help them. There are some methods. One is very much pictorial methods. They draw their community, they identify their issues and the challenges. And accordingly, they recommend what to be, what not to be. Their indigenous knowledge, their wisdom always help us. And we add new knowledge. Let me give you some example. For children, we offer education those who live in the Sandbar Island. It's Riverine Island, break every year. And we realize it's very difficult in the Sandbar Island to build and to construction of a school. So we design a structure what can help children to continue their education, and we can dismantle if any emergency appears. And local people has those ideas and technology, how can dismantle those things. So that, Friendship has an education program and health program particularly. We realize this very remotest community will not find health practitioners, will not find the health aid. So we recruited people, we selected people from the community, not that much educated, but we trained them to be the first aid for the people in need. We train them as a community Medicaid. And we use the technology like cell phone. We just install algorithm and all others so they can immediately help them or they can connect them with the health services. So adaptation can't be a single episode. That should be connected with the multiple support needed and different whatever purpose needed in your life, education, health, economic opportunity. And these local people has the solution. They can connect those dots, but you need to extend your support to take it forward with trust, with respect, dignity, and financial management. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kazi. We must have the trust on the people that we work with because they have the solutions with them. Charles, allow me to come to you. Park J is also a very strong champion on local led adaptation, not only in practice, but also in advocacy. In your experience, what are some of the challenges and bottlenecks in supporting local led adaptation in Africa? And how can we address these challenges?
Thank you so much, Obed, for that. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you so much for that question. I think this is an important conversation because time has come for us now to move from these big rooms, big conferences, and really move to the crowd where the crowd actually hits the road. I think that is crucial. Thank you so much. So I was saying that the time has come for us to move from these big conferences and to move to the ground really where the rubber meets the road. And this is where we find, the communities at the front line of climate crisis. And therefore, time has come really for locally led approaches in terms of solving the problems of the communities. Because many times we sometimes pretend to know the challenges of the communities, yeah, they know what they are going through, they know the solutions, we only need to facilitate them to enable them achieve that. But I think we also make mistakes in terms of how we interpret localization. And I want to say that there are different levels of localization. When you find yourself implementing a project and where communities or local actors are benefiting, but they are not involved in prioritization, they are not involved in designing of that given initiative, at that level you say there is no localization. And we cannot call that a locally, led kind of an approach in that particular case. But you can move to another level where we talk about a limited localization. In this particular case, you realize that communities are going to get engaged. But again, we're also going to get to see some real attempts to engage communities in prioritizing the initiatives, but again, in terms of designing. But we need to move a notch higher and probably go to partial, localization, where we are going to find that communities and the project proponents, of course, operate at an equal, scale. And this is where we talk about procedural justice now, getting to happen, where we get to see communities and local actors and those that are most affected having an opportunity, in terms of contributing to the design and prioritization, of their projects. But even then, we are not there yet, because we need to move to that level of higher localization, where communities will be involved in designing. They're also going to be involved in prioritization. And in this particular case, this is happening at a level where they have some level of say. But still at this level, there is a lot of external framing. And we need now to move to full localization, where communities will benefit, they will participate in prioritization, they will participate in designing, but most importantly, they will be involved and they will take lead, of course, in terms of prioritization. Now, taking lead is very key. And therefore, until we reach that level where the most affected communities have an opportunity to take lead in framing and prioritizing exactly what they want to do, we will not have achieved, full, localization if we don't achieve or we don't reach that particular level. And in this regard, therefore, I think there are several challenges that we've been experiencing in terms of, localizing this particular project. One of them is how we interpret localization, like I've indicated. And sometimes when you're thinking that we are localizing, we're in actual sense not localizing. Number two, we need to have proper policy frameworks that are going to support local initiatives. In Kenya, for example, now we have a program that we are now calling Financing Local Actions, which is at least now using devolved units of governance in terms of making sure that projects are able to reach communities wherever they are in their counties or in that subnational jurisdiction. And I think that is one. We put policies that are conducive and that are going to allow localization. But most importantly, you know, these other enabling factors, especially finances. We are not talking about, you know, calling for adaptation financing, you know, more than double, you know, considering that we have $340 billion, you know, gap. But I think what is important is how do we ensure that those resources are able to flow where communities are. I know we are all conversant with the 8 principles of locally led actions. How do we ensure that programs that we are working on are also flexible, you know, so that we are also able to adapt depending on the needs of the communities. Sometimes we tend to assume communities are tabula rasa or an empty slate where we can go and write. We need to use their experiences, their local level experiences, and be able to support them along those particular lines. But I think it's also important, you know, to address structural inequalities. Issues of gender are very, very, very key. At the moment, especially in Africa, we are talking about Radtana issues. And you realize that I think it's about, and if I'm correct, I think about 5% of women are the ones that normally own land, you know, based on our cultural, you know, patriarchal system of society. But I think it's important that we ensure that access to some of these factors of production is also made available, you know, to members of both gender, so that we can also be able to ensure that we are actually addressing the challenges of communities, especially the women who are most impacted. You know, whenever there is a case, you know, of adverse, you know, climate challenges, the women are the ones who suffer most. Men, of course, are going to go to urban centers, you know, disguising to go and look for, you know, jobs and so on and so forth. But it's a woman who will put food on the table, who is going to bring firewood, who is going to bring water, and therefore address these structural inequalities, you know, within the society. But also even within governance. You know, in terms of leadership, who are the leaders and who are making decisions? And are these leaders really, you know, have they come to terms with the realities, you know, of the communities that need support at that particular level? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I mean, those are very, very critical inputs. And of course, one thing you've said is it has really come time for us to, leave the boardrooms and go where this action is actually needed on the ground. But at the same time, how are these communities that we work with involved and engaged even in the discussions here at the COP? You've also mentioned that, of course, the aspect of proper policy framework that really supports locally led adaptation is a very, very important aspect. Allow us to go for a short commercial break and invite our technician to play a short clip on how a very critical group, the youth, are also engaged in locally led adaptation before we get the next speaker. Over to you.
We see that more young people now fighting the adverse effects of climate change in the community. And I believe most of the people in the community now can leverage this knowledge to also impact more people across different communities while ensuring sustainability and more development in their community.
Hello everyone, my name is Cheuma Machia, Zimbabwe, Chimanimani district, Makwe Ward 18, Chukutukutu village.
Ndinoitwa consider mandikushanda boka revechidiki vakomana nevasikana mabasa ekuchengetedza nharaunda muno mumakwe Ward 18.
Tinoshanda pamwe chete nePSO neTsuro Trust kubva kumatambudziko anokonzerwa neclimate change.
As a youth volunteer, I had the opportunity to learn about the importance of community building and the power of collective action.
passionate about changing the sources of energy that my community use for cooking. I want to create an alternative source of cooking energy to electricity and to gas and to firewood. That's why I came up with an idea of making briquettes from agricultural waste.
My name is Enoch Mwangilwa from Zambia, and we are implementing a project we call Smart Climate Actions in Zambia. We are transforming school production units into climate-smart spaces, spaces where children and young people are learning about how to practice climate-smart agriculture, methods that will enable them to make land more productive in the long term, methods that are enabling them to learn how to use water in a more sustainable manner.
মোহাম্মদ আলমগীর হোসেন পূর্ব গোবিন্দপুর রিভারগ্রিন যুব সংঘের কোষাধ্যক্ষ। আমি নকশিকাঁথা ভিএসওর মাধ্যমে ট্রেনিং পেয়ে আমি আমার ক্লাবের পক্ষ থেকে ভার্মি কম্পোস্ট উৎপাদন করে বাণিজ্যিকভাবে বাজারজাতকরণের জন্য সেই লক্ষ্যে আমি ভার্মি কম্পোস্ট উৎপাদন করতেছি। আমি আশা করতেছি যে এই ভার্মি কম্পোস্ট উৎপাদন করে
Firstly, mangroves help our community during typhoons. The mangroves that we plant provide protection to households.
जो VSO ने हमें सिर्फ ये नहीं बताया कि ये जो है वो सिर्फ स्कूल के तहत आप इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं।
ओवरऑल जो आइडिया था वो ये था कि बेसिकली जो बच्चों के ऑलरेडी फ्लड से इफेक्ट होने की वजह से जो एक लर्निंग गैप आ चुका है और लर्निंग लॉसेस हो चुके हैं, उस गैप को फिल किया जाए और एक इस तरह का क्लासरूम का लर्निंग एनवायरनमेंट क्रिएट किया जाए जहाँ के बच्चे प्रोडक्टिवली उस लर्निंग गैप को ओवरकम कर सकें और अपने लर्निंग लॉसेस को अटेन कर सकें।
That's powerful. Thank you, VSO, for the good work that you are doing, of course, in championing the work of the youth. Let's give them a better clap, please. Wezi, allow me to come to you. VSO really is well known for championing the youth leadership, especially when it comes to climate justice. And especially on this issue of locally-led adaptation, we would like for you to paint a picture on what LLA means for the youth in Malawi, where you come from, and Africa in general, and what are some of the key issues that are emerging in this discourse. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Obed. Thank you so much. So what locally led adaptation means for youth in Malawi is, in one word, I would say empowerment. And what empowerment means is the technical capacity of our youth to be able to identify their vulnerabilities. What vulnerabilities are youth facing because of climate change? Do the youth have a voice to lobby for climate action and solutions to those vulnerabilities, as well as what are the technical capacities that youth in the community require for them to be able to address the vulnerabilities that they are experiencing. I'm going to share an example. In Malawi, VSO is working with around 45,000 youth. Because we focused on localizing support from the local district government, we went through the National Youth Council of Malawi to identify youth volunteers at the national level. We call them youth champions. And then at the district level, we're working with youth clubs and youth networks. VSO provides training and capacity building to these youth for them to be able to conduct climate change risk planning, as well as climate change action plans. These action plans, the youth volunteers themselves, they take them to the district climate change office, as well as the district youth office, to follow up on support that is required for the youth within the community. So what does advancing locally led adaptation look like for Malawi and beyond? is number one, the youth should be able to have a voice, to be able to interpret their vulnerabilities, to be able to rank the risks that are affecting youth across different communities. And then using those risk assessments, the youth themselves should be able to come up with action plans that will help them address and find solutions to those vulnerabilities. In the long term, youth will be able to track and monitor the progress that has been achieved in the community. Youth will be able to come back and say, this is where we were 2 years ago, and this is the progress that we have made. These are the challenges we're still experiencing, but this is where we want to go. So taking stock of where we're coming from, what has gone well with the capacity that youth have been given, and then what are the outstanding gaps. Us as NGOs, the government, CSOs, we can come in to provide support, but locally led adaptation means the bottom-up approach that Cotilda talked about, that youth are the ones who are going to lead the process. The community will lead the process, whether it's in the community, in the schools, or wherever it is that locally led adaptation needs to take place. Climate change is affecting communities in all different areas. So what we're looking for is a voice and technical capacity to address the vulnerabilities that our communities are experiencing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, let's give a good round of applause. So youth really need to have a voice to be able to interpret their vulnerabilities and come up with action plans, monitor them, and of course, lead the process. I think it's high time. Cotilda, let me come back to you again before we go to the next panelist. Charles mentioned one very critical aspect around structural inequalities, especially gender, when it comes to locally led. What is the place of gender in locally led adaptation? What is needed to scale gender in LLA, in communities, especially those in Africa, from where you sit?
Thank you. Thank you so much. So when you ask me what the place of gender is in locally led, I would say it is in the center. Just like I said, the people who are impacted by climate change should be at the center. We need to understand that these people, it's not a homogeneous community. It is a community that is made up of different groups of people. And much as they all experience changes in climate, the impacts are experienced differently. Now, when it comes to gender, the gender considerations, we find that in many African societies, and I'll speak about my own that I know very well about, we find that in our societies, in the Ugandan society particularly, there are already existing inequalities between men and women, and these inequalities have been there. They are as a result of culture, some of them are as a result of religion, so they are there. So now when it comes to issues of climate change, and my experience is that as we start thinking about the road to adaptation, you find that it becomes much easier for one group to catch up than the other. So the group that is already behind, because of various reasons, they are behind in terms of education, they are behind in terms of ownership of assets, they are behind in terms of leadership, they are behind in terms of voice, they are behind in many spheres. So you'll find that as you start to talk about adaptation, you cannot apply the same approach with all groups. So the women, for example, as you think about adaptation, you have to think about how it is going to apply to the men, how it is going to apply to the youth, how it is going to apply to the men, women, and the youth. It's not going to be the same. So without us rolling up our sleeves and going into the detail, it is going to be very difficult for us to talk about holistic resilience to climate change, building holistic resilience. you will end up with actions that have empowered one group above the other. And for as long as we have half the population, because we know that women are almost half, and in my country, actually, women are more than half of our population. So if you find that you're leaving behind almost half of the population, then you have done half the work. So gender is, like I said, putting the people who are impacted at the center. It now means taking a further step to look at these people and look at the differences that are therein. Many African countries have made strides in terms of addressing issues of gender, and my country is one of those. We have a number of frameworks that are in place in all different sectors, not natural resources alone, in all different sectors to advance issues of gender. And I really applaud the government of Uganda for that, because I can also tell you that if it wasn't for affirmative action for the girls in education, maybe I wouldn't even be here. So Uganda has made strides, but yet we still see that we need to do a lot of work, especially in giving women voice. Women to be in the boardrooms where decisions are being made in regards to building resilience to climate change. And as CARE International in Uganda, that is very core to the work that we do. We put women and girls at the center, and we have realized that the issue of voice is very important. It is not going to be obvious. Women, we have been in the back seat for a very long time, that sometimes even when you give a woman a platform, she has no idea how to use that platform. We realize that we even have to go a step further to prepare this woman to be able to use that platform and voice, the issues of her own issues and the issues of other women. So we see there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And of course, at CARE, we say women have to be able to voice their issues. There are many areas where the men, thank you very much, you're helping us to voice the issues of women, but the women have to be helped and to be supported to voice their issues. And there are also cases where we have seen that the men are in a much more vulnerable position. Pastoral communities, for example, we have seen the challenges that the men have gone through. So gender is really at the heart. If the people who are impacted are the heart of the locally led agenda, then gender probably is the pulse, that is beating within there, that we need to make sure that we keep alive so that we can have holistic, locally led interventions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kotilda. Gender is at the pulse, not at the heart of LLA, and it must be so. And you've also mentioned that, of course, women must be helped to voice, to voice their issues, and also because they also have solutions within them, so they have to be involved and being part and parcel of the solutions. John, you're a climate finance guru. You have been part of developing many finance reports. You've also done work in Africa, the factual fiction report that was tracking adaptation finance. And if you've heard all those speakers, when you talk about locally led, we cannot talk about locally led without talking about the issue of finance, and especially how this finance is accessible to those who actually need it, especially women and girls who are the front line of climate crisis. So even here, the negotiations, finance is actually the elephant in the room. One of the key aspects, of course, even at this COP, is how this finance is going to be accessible to those who need it. So where is the finance? Where is the money? What opportunities are there to finance locally led adaptation in Africa and beyond? And what lesson can we learn on financing mechanisms for locally led adaptation? Over to you. I know it's a loaded question, but yeah, we want to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Obed. I just want to check if sound is okay. Thanks. Let me start by saying that I really think that I mean, this conversation is so important. It's so important to build on the knowledge and capacities and the resources in the vulnerable communities. And I also agree with what you said, that it's important to have national policy frameworks in place that sort of supports the work you do out there. But then taking that thing into these big rooms, as you say, I think it's so important that we have a discussion of how to get more international support for community-based adaptation. And I think that African negotiators, they should stand firm, prioritize the demand to have a roadmap for doubling adaptation finance here at COP28. Not that the roadmap as such is made here, but that there, from this conference, is a commitment on the developed countries to develop such a roadmap to doubling adaptation finance. So if you look at the texts that are in the negotiation rooms, then you will see that this commitment to double adaptation finance by 2025, it's mentioned here and there in the texts several times and so on, but it's sort of mostly a restatement of the commitment that was already made 2 years ago in Glasgow. And then, I mean, we won't get anywhere if we only get a restatement. And that is because it's so difficult for donors or contributors of climate finance, whatever you call the wealthy countries. It's so difficult for them actually to scale up adaptation finance. If you look at the last numbers we got from UNEP in the Adaptation Gap Report and from the OECD, then they say actually that adaptation finance dropped by 15% from 2020 to 2021. It shows that, I mean, it's not just a quick fix. You can't just get adaptation finance up. And allow me to share a few numbers with you. I mean, if we want to have a doubling of adaptation finance, then it means that adaptation finance would grow from the level of around 20 billion in those years, 2019, to 40 billion. And we've looked into the climate finance plans by the rich countries. A lot of these rich countries, they don't have a clear target for adaptation finance. And I mean, most of those countries that don't have a clear target, they don't prioritize it. But if we look at those 10 countries that has a quantitative target for adaptation finance in 2025, and if we assume that they actually deliver what their targets are, then they will combine these 10 countries, they will deliver $14.3 billion. So from $14.3 billion to 40 billion, there's a huge gap. And of course, I mean, maybe I should just say that in the $14.3 billion, they include 3 billion from the US. And if you follow sort of the political discussions in the US, then you'll know that the US government has indeed difficulties in getting any kind of money for international purposes through the Congress. So, I mean, there's a huge gap here, and it's sort of recognized a little by the developed countries. They have a process where Germany and Canada, they look at the different contributions from the different countries and look at trends and so on. And Germany and Canada, they shared their conclusions 2 weeks ago. And then in their conclusions, their sort of solution to reach the $40 billion target was to scale up finance through MDBs, like the World Bank and the African Development Bank and so on. But that means loans. So their solution, the wealthy countries' solution for developing countries, is that you should take on more loans for adaptation, and that would be the way to double adaptation finance. And I mean, seen from my perspective, that's just far out. The wealthy countries, they need to take the responsibility for this, and they need to commit to develop a clear plan. And then when they have this clear plan, we have an opportunity to criticize it and comment on it and so on. So I think really that African negotiators should stay firm on the demand for having such a plan. And I mean, it should at least be in the top 3 of your demands in the final negotiations here from the conference. I could say a few more things about false solutions and what could go wrong if we scale up climate finance for adaptation, but maybe that's, I mean, there might not be time for that, but over to you, Obed.
Thank you, John. Maybe I can give you 1 more minute to touch on the false solutions.
So I think the 2 most important false solutions is to ensure that adaptation finance is really additional. That means it comes on top of ODA. It's not that donors, they can take money that was actually supposed to be going into health or education or women's rights activities and so on, and shift it to adaptation. That won't help anyone. It will just shift, attention to those that need adaptation finance from those that needed education or health or empowerment and so on. So I think that's crucial, and it happens all the time when it comes to climate finance, that donors, they divert finance. And the other false solution is that developed countries, they over-report, that they actually, in their numbers, they include all kind of activities that are not really adaptation finance. We also see that a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. You've, of course, talked about doubling, a roadmap for doubling. But as from Africa, we're actually saying we need more than doubling. Because even the amount of money that is for doubling is just a drop in the ocean compared to what we require for adaptation. Of course, we've talked about the new and additional, and some of the questions we need to ask ourselves, even the money that has actually been pledged for loss and damage, is it really new and additional? You will be surprised to find that most of it is not. And of course, the issue of over-reporting. Colleagues, we have less than 10 minutes for the discussions that are quite interesting. Kazi, I know I'll come back to you to clarify on how do we scale from local to global, but I want to take this to the audience for any questions, quick questions and maybe comments that we may have. Then I'll give the panelists a final round to be able to make their final remarks. Maybe we can have the questions asked, then you can be able to clarify on that. Questions? Please be specific on who you are directing your question into.
Thank you, Obed. You'll help me to be specific, but I wanted us to address the issue of LLAs and migration, because it plays a really... LLAs and migration, climate-forced migration, because it plays a really key role in terms of adaptive capacities of communities. And so how does that space look like, perhaps to our finance guru or our other expert? But I wonder what that space looks like, because LLAs normally target communities, but within the climate space, the forced migration becomes a really key part in terms of peace and security and conflict resolution. So what are the opportunities, or what do you see around that space? Thanks, Obed.
Thank you. Any other question? Over there.
Good evening. Thank you, distinguished panelists. I have a question for Charles. Charles, quite pleased with your articulation about locally, local plans in terms of how you're going about the county government. I just wanted to probably get some more insight in terms of what's the execution style, if you like, that you're using to get to the counties. Is it a partnership with the county government specifically? Is it with the Council of Governors? I would just kindly just want to hear you expound on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more questions here, then we take it back. Oh, okay, one.
Thank you very much. John made mention of the false solution. Also, there is a false solution for locally led adaptation, and that has been a community-based adaptation, which just a subset. And most of the funding coming, only less than 10% has been going directly, funding for adaptation, less than 10% is going for locally led adaptation. And even this, most of it is just community-based, that's involving only limited actors. So what can you say about those confusion between funding for locally led adaptation and being used for that of community-based adaptation rather than locally led adaptation, which involves multiple stakeholders? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So no more questions. In the interest of time, I'll turn the mic to the panelists to respond. Maybe probably can start with Charles and John. Charles, you respond to the question on the counties. Then John on the false solutions. Then probably Kazi, as you tackle local to global, then you can also tackle the issue of migration, LLA and migration. Yeah. Charles, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I think he's referring to the example I gave for Kenya.
And maybe as you finish, give your final remarks, key message.
All right. And that project is a project that is funded by different donors, World Bank, the government of Denmark, Netherlands, and several partners have put money in that particular kitty. But this is a model which is really focusing on ensuring the subnational jurisdiction, in which case in Kenya now, those are counties. Money is able to flow, and counties are able to be funded, so they can be able to implement locally led actions, with the communities. But what is important is the fact that there are different structures that have been put in place, and even civil societies now have a role to play, so that there is some sort of an instrument, established in a way that civil societies are able to engage. There's a framework for engagement, and even in the local planning committees within the counties, we have communities getting, very much involved in terms of how those resources going to the counties are going to move. Of course, the project is still in those early stages. And we have to see, of course, whether the counties themselves are going to ensure that the money actually reaches the ward, where probably this money so much are needed. But I think that is just a typical example of how we're able to move really from national government in terms of working on programs at that level and taking that programming to the people. Of course, I'm not downplaying the importance of multilateral processes like what we have now, because these conversions have to continue. But I'm saying in terms of efforts, in terms of allocation of resources, much of the resources needs to go to the communities and where that is much needed. We have to address the question of access. And one of the challenges we've been having in terms of access to resources, and especially financial resources, is the fact that modalities and protocols that have been established by the instruments available like the GCF are so difficult for community level probably project proponents, to be able to work on a project that can be funded. Because when we talk about a bankable project, when we talk about a proposal that probably is going to sail through all the protocols and the procedures that one has to actually, meet, it becomes very, very difficult for communities to be able to access those resources, and therefore you don't find these projects flowing where they are needed most. So you have to address the question of access. We have to address the question of those bottlenecks that make it difficult for these communities to be able to access such funding.
Thank you so much, Charles. John?
So I've also read this study saying that only like 10% of the adaptation finance reaches the local communities. And I think that there are like two problems here. And one of the problems is that the wealthy countries, they actually count a lot of things as adaptation finance, which is really not directed at the local communities at all. It could be big infrastructure projects that has an adaptation component, and then they will count it as adaptation finance. I've seen examples of highways being called adaptation finance, or bridges in capitals and so on. So, you know, it has to do with how lax the rules for reporting adaptation finance are. And in fact, there are no rules. It's up to the wealthy country own decision to define what they want to call adaptation finance. And therefore, we of course need to have clear definitions of adaptation finance here and more transparency. So that's one part of the problem, but then of course, there are probably also some difficulties in some of the developing countries that the adaptation programs are inefficient and are not really targeting the vulnerable communities in the countryside and so on. And I've seen fellow NGOs in some countries trying to track adaptation finance in their own countries. I mean, I have tried from sort of the northern angle to track adaptation finance and see how much is adaptation finance and does it actually impact the vulnerable people and go to them. But there are also a number of NGOs in the south that try to track the resources that come into their country and see if those resources actually reaches the vulnerable parts of the population. And I can only encourage all southern NGOs to think of making that kind of activities, and we would of course like to cooperate on that kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Kazi, how can we scale LLA from local to global? And probably if you can also tackle the question on migration and one key message that take away from this session.
Sure. First of all, let's very briefly give you, let's share with an overview of the whole situation. I will share you some statistics, and don't stick with the statistics, just look back the trend behind. The global funding for finance, global finance for climate increase is almost double, 1.3 trillion. But if you see, just visit a Global Center Adaptation site, you'll find those. The Adaptation Fund reduced 7% to 5%. Think about Africa. That was 2 years before 39%, now it is 36%. Last several years, we are raising our voice to make sure the climate finance should be 50-50, adaptation and mitigation. I'm not sure our voice is reaching the negotiation room or not, but until unless we increase adaptation finance, it's very challenging to make sure the local level, locally led adaptation. Then the finance part I claim. Then locally led. Locally led, if we really mean it, then we need to make sure whole structure, the government structure, international donor structure, redesigned. When funding comes from international donors or UN agencies, do we decide local level? So we need to revisit our structure to make sure the funding mechanism itself needs to be restructured to make sure local adaptation. And that, you know, if you see the 8 principles, the first principle, decision making. Decision making, we are expecting at the community level to take decisions. But at the same time, not only community making, all the stakeholders related to these decisions need to make the decision at the bottom line. If you see the resource mobilization, funding, we need to pre-position funding, not prescribe funding. We are really now prescribed funding. We pre-position funding, let community, let local level take decision, and funding must be flexible. So that, until unless, and it's another structure, equity and or balance. Do we have, in the community level, definitely we need this, but do we have the structural equity in the international community, international level? Do we have? No. We have structural inequities between UN, international, local organizations. That we need to, structure. 10% is really big question mark, but even emergency response, 2.5% reaching to the local people, local actors. And we know one very known statistics on Start Fund, that is, the emergency response, we can predict 55%, and funding goes only 1% in advance. So these are the issues, decision making at the local level. I request what the key messages from here, the stakeholders also revisit their structure, decision-making mechanism to be shifted at the local level. Funding must be flexible, and that flexible funding should go at the local level to take decision how best they can use the funding. Until unless we do, and we from this COP presidency raise the voice and appeal to the government to restructure their decision-making mechanism up to the local level. Local government should be able to take decisions there. Until unless local government has the ability to take decisions, if community take decision and they need help, support from the local government, it will never work. The whole thing, if we really want to make it forward, take it forward. If we really don't want to take it, keep it as a jargon, so we need to restructure the stakeholders mechanism, finance mechanism, and the whole initiatives of the government and international agencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Of course, we cannot end without hearing from the two ladies there. Maybe, Kotilda, I want to hear from you. What is your key message that you want the audience to get out of it from this session?
Thank you so much. I think listening to the fellow panelists, especially around the challenges of increasing funding for locally led actions, it takes me to looking at ways in which we can deploy the little that is coming through in a much more efficient way. And I think Kazi has spoken to that. We need to think about the landscape, the institutional landscape that is delivering locally led or the local adaptation actions. I think when you look at it, the pyramid is vast. So you see the international organizations, receiving and retaining much more funding as compared to the national and local institutions. I think we also need to look internally and ask ourselves, are we really pro locally led adaptation actions? If we are, then we are going to reorganize the way we do business to ensure that much of the funding is actually being retained by local institutions and local organizations, and that we are not only giving them funding, but we are giving them voice and we are giving them power to make decisions over how this funding is used. At CARE, especially CARE Uganda, we have made a decision that 50% of all the money that we have, of our entire budget, should go through local and national partners. And that is a goal that we are prepared to achieve by mid-2024.
Thank you. Thank you, Kotilda. Wezi, 30 seconds.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
You're being told to finish.
No worries. So after all is said and done, committed funding for locally led adaptation, very important. The youth require resources to be able to follow up with the commitments the local government has made on their action plans. But one key thing that I wanted to point out is the need for continued research, monitoring, and learning, so that we're able to generate evidence of what is really working for local aid adaptation and what is not working. With that data, we can justify how the funding has been used, what has been effective, what has really brought about impact, and what is sustainable and what is not. So the need to invest in continued research for the generation of data and evidence cannot be overemphasized. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please, colleagues, let's give them a very good round of applause. They've really done a very good job unpacking this topic on locally led adaptation. The discussion doesn't end here. But some of the key messages that have come out of this session is we need the resources to go to where they're actually required, especially to women and girls who are mostly affected. The modalities of access need to be simplified and donor structure redesigned. Stakeholders need to revisit the decision-making mechanism to the local level. And of course, funding needs to be flexible. And Kazi, you also reminded us that we must have trust on the community that we work with. We really need to have that trust. Proper policy framework that Charles talked about, and gender must be at the pulse of locally led adaptation. Thank you so much, colleagues. We've come to the end of the session, and yeah, enjoy your evening. Thank you so much. Let's have a quick photo here.
There's a question and answer. Okay. Hello. Hi. Good evening. Good evening for the ones which have the. Faut parler fort. Hi. Good evening. We're here to share a testimony. Hi. So thank you for the ones that will be there. We're here to share a testimony that could surprise you. We talk about climate change in the theoretical way, and we in the Central African Republic booth have developed a surprising solution that can tick a lot of the boxes, and that we would like to share with you. Okay, good. So if you... Okay. Okay. So in 1 minute we'll start with this testimony that can be surprising to you, because we have developed a solution that can be shared everywhere, and Not yet? 1 minute, okay. Hi. So good evening. We will start the next session, sharing a testimony a solution that we developed in Central African Republic. Do you have people coming? People coming? No? Okay, good. Okay, fine. So for the few ones that stayed, we can have a direct dialogue, French or English as you want, then we're free to do it. I think yeah. So we've been talking for the last. No, no. Okay. So, merci. On est live. Bon. Oui, voilà. OK. Bon, je crois qu'on ne va pas faire la présentation. Est-ce qu'on peut la reprogrammer dans un time slot plus adapté? Jusqu'au 10, ouais, on va la reprogrammer. Et probablement changer de titre également. OK, merci d'avoir programmé cette présentation. On va essayer de la reprogrammer dans un time slot plus adapté.
Test 1 1 1 1.